I'm grateful for your being here. I call into this sacred space the holy heart of this community. There is a third, isn't there? When we have a mother and a father, there is a third presence. When we have a husband and a wife, there is a third presence. When we have each of us and our community, there is a third presence that comes forward that is who we are as one united heart. So let us begin in that place of one united heart, knowing that we are connected, knowing that each of us will gain what we need from this time, that it is by holy ordination that we are here and not by accident. And let us open our hearts to the possibility that we might leave here feeling passionate and awake and alive and ready. Connie, will you start for us this morning?
When the music fades into the past, when my days of life are through, what will be remembered of where I've come when all is said and done? Will they say I loved my family, that I was a faithful friend, that I lived to share a heart of love when all is said and done? How I long to see the hour when I will hear that trumpet sound and rise to see my own true face and smile and say, well done. You can forget my name and the songs I've sung, every rhyme and every tune, but remember the love we shared as one when all is said and done. Oh, how I long to see the hour when I will hear that trumpet sound and rise to see my own true face and smile and say, well done. You can forget my name and every song I've sung, every rhyme and every tune. Just remember the love we shared as one when all is said and done. When all is said and done.
Thank you, Connie. So last week, we talked about what ancestors are, why it's important for us to think about our ancestors. And we talked about how we are connected by a single ancestor, according to science, about 400 years ago. That's about 50 generations, is what we were told. About 50 generations ago, we all of us living right now on the planet share a common ancestor. That's kind of a phenomenal and mind-boggling thing to think about all by itself. We also talked about what we gained from our ancestors and why we honored them, and also the things that may have gone wrong with our ancestors and what needs to be healed in us. And we did a little healing work. This week, we're going to look in a different direction. This week, we are going to consider who we are going forward, who we are as someone's ancestor. So I want to start by saying, if we have a common ancestor 400 years ago, then it makes sense that any one of us could be a common ancestor for everyone on the planet 400 years from now. So I want to invite you to consider, what if it's you? What if you are the person who is the common ancestor for everyone on the planet 400 years from now? That's almost too big to imagine, but I want you to imagine it anyway. I want it to be your point of reference for our entire morning, that you are the one, because really you are. So I also want to share with you that we talked about 7 generations, what several tribes practice as 7 generations from now.
It's timely, actually, that we're considering things like sustainability and resiliency as we prepare for the generations that are coming after us. There's a teaching that's found within many indigenous cultures that talks about the 7 generations, the need to consider our impacts on each other, on our environment, and for those faces who have yet to come. So when you see the 7 generations represented in a pictograph or within an illustration, you'll see that these 7 figures are connected. You'll see that there's a thread that binds all of them. And this again reinforces and really causes us to consider our relation, our interconnection, and our dependency on each other from those that have come before us and for those that will come after us. The teaching places us within a continuum whereby each one of us has parents, and for many of us, we've been lucky to spend time with them, to learn from them and to teach them. We've also therefore had grandparents. Many of us are lucky that we've had time to spend with them, to learn from them and to teach them. And though many of us don't remember it, and perhaps neither do they, we have had time with our great-grandparents. We've had time to learn from them, to teach them, and really absorb some of their journeys within their time on Mother Earth. If we're lucky, we'll each have a child. We'll have time to learn from them and to teach them. If we're really lucky, we'll also be able to spend time with our grandchildren. We'll have time to learn from them, we'll have time to teach them. And if we're really lucky, we'll be able to spend time with our great-grandchildren. The point being, though, is that each one of us spends time in each one of those areas. We spend time as a great-grandparent, a grandparent, a parent, a child, a grandchild, and a great-grandchild. And so the foundational principle of the 7 generations, as I know it to be, is that our choices, our behaviors, and our mistakes reverberate that far throughout history. And so really we challenge ourselves, we challenge each other to make our decisions and our impacts within creation, within that timeline, to respect and care for those 7 generations.
Let me share the screen with you again and show you something a little bit different than that, but very related. How about that? So that is our little Sadie. Sadie is going to be 2 the end of November, and she is our granddaughter. She's our son, Jerry, and his wife, Anna's little girl. And this is pretty much a perfect expression of how Sadie experiences life right now. On the planet, Sadie is delighted with everything that's happening. Of course, she doesn't know a lot about what's happening. She knows how it feels to have grass under her feet and what the sunshine feels like against her skin. And she knows if the food that's given to her is yummy or not, and what her favorite cartoon on TV is. And she knows that the world is a safe place because she doesn't have anything to compare it to except the people that are the closest to her. So I want to invite all of you who are right now considering that you might be the common ancestor 400 years from now to consider Sadie. To consider that somehow what we know today is that somehow all the people on the planet are related to Sadie, including you. And that means that somehow through lines of connection, you will be Sadie's ancestor. And if you have a grandchild of your own, then this is just one of the children who are looking to you to make decisions about the future. Just one. I just want us to think about what it means to hold the future for the children who are coming after us. So I have here, I'll hold it up for you, a little porcelain dish. This dish came from France, and it was given to my father's mother's mother, my great-grandmother, who was from here, by a woman who immigrated to France, immigrated from France to here. And at the time, it was considered very precious. It was very precious because that long ago, to travel from France and carry something as fragile as this and have it make the trip, first of all, you couldn't take everything with you from France. It wasn't as easy as it is now to move. You didn't order a pod and put everything in and it got shipped across. It was a much bigger process. You had to be very discerning about what you would take with you. And things like this that would break easily were considered a little bit frivolous because they weren't likely to make it. And not only were they considered frivolous, but you would look at something like this if you were in France and you would think, oh, it would break my heart if I got there and this was broken. It would be the beginning of my new experience to unpack boxes and find something broken and break my heart because it was gone forever. So generally things like this were given away to someone in the homeland and not brought with them. And that made this little small dish ever so much more precious. And the woman who passed it on to my grandmother did not have family here to give it to. And she didn't tell my grandmother a lot about the story of this dish, only that it was incredibly precious to her and that she wanted to give it to someone who would hold it as very precious. And so my grandmother held it. My great-grandmother held it, and then she passed it on to my grandmother. And my grandmother didn't give it to my dad because my dad would have not known what to do with this. But not too long before my grandmother passed away, she gave this dish to me with a note And the note inside has the name of the woman who gave this dish originally to our family. And I look at this dish and I hold it very precious, and I keep it in a very safe place up on a shelf where I can see it, because to me it represents history and travel and change. But I keep it up and safe and out of the way because someday it will belong to Sadie. Someday I will pass it on to her. So I don't consider it mine. I consider it an heirloom, a family heirloom that I have been invited to love and treasure and hold for some period of time. And when I give it to Sadie, I will give it to her with the same story, that this is yours to hold and to love. And this is what I know about it. And this is what it teaches. This is what it shares with you. So enjoy it until you have a granddaughter of your own. And if you don't have a granddaughter of your own, then choose someone very special to pass this on to. I take the time to share that story because when we think of being ancestors, we have to think about what it is that we are passing on. We have to think about what it means to be an ancestor. So there are many things in life that we hold that are not ours. There were things that were held by our ancestors that were not them. They didn't belong to them. The soil that they tilled and the agricultural advancements that they made. That soil is our soil, and it's the soil of our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and those who come after them. We benefited from the agricultural growth. We benefited from medical advancement. We benefited in many ways. And we also carry the markings of our ancestral choices. So no one living here invented white supremacy. We did not invent it. It's something that came to us. It's something that exists in our society today that we have responsibility for addressing. And it's important for us to recognize that that is the result of ancestry. That colonialism and what happened, that slavery, what happened that brought forth white supremacy the way it has been brought forth in our culture, happened in our ancestral lines. When we think about that, it makes who we are as ancestors much more important. It helps us to understand how many of us have said, but I never did that. And our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren will have the same opportunities based on the choices that we make. So to live into 7 generations, we have to consider the generations before us that we're familiar with and the generations who will come after us. A lot of times people think that 7 generations means just we have to think 7 generations in front of us. It's more than that. We have to think generations behind us and generations ahead of us. What do we know about our great-grandparents? What do we know about what is their legacy? What have they passed on to us? What did we learn from them and from our grandparents? Really, have we taken the time to think about and write down and capture the most important things that we've learned from those who came most immediately before us, who had interaction in our lives? What did they give us that we want to pass on to the generations that come afterward? What did they give us that is valuable enough that we feel responsible for passing on the wisdom that was given? As I think back about my own generations, I think about my great-grandmother who came here from Italy, and she traveled by boat onto Ellis Island and by train to meet her cousin. She married her first cousin. And when they met and got married, she didn't speak any English. When she came here, she traveled from Italy without knowing the language here. And they traveled into Minnesota where it was very, very cold. And they had 8 children. And she passed away. I met her once. I was 6 weeks old, so I have no memory of her other than what I've been told about her, which is that she was a little bit of a spitfire and pretty independent and loved to watch soap operas. So when I think about her, I think about passing on an adventurous spirit. That she was adventurous and she was brave, and she even when she couldn't speak the language, she came here. So I think about instilling in my grandchildren a willingness to have new adventures, to see things differently, to see the world, even if you can't communicate, to see the world. And when I think about my grandmother, she lived during that time of Rosie the Riveter. She was one of those women. She was one of those women who worked really hard at a time when women didn't work, who went out and did the work that was necessary in the country, that was being asked of people in the country to support what was going on. She worked her whole life, as long as I can remember. And she always had a smile. She always felt blessed by life. And when I think about what she taught me, I think about passing on to my children the importance of smiling, the importance of finding something every day, no matter how hard you're working or what the condition of the world is, to find something every day that blesses you. Those are important things. When I think about my own mother, my mom lived in Alaska with my dad. My dad was in the Air Force. And many of you have met my mother. My mother dug through 70 feet of permafrost to put in a septic system in Alaska, in Fairbanks, where we lived. My mother lived on an 80-acre homestead 20 miles outside of town, 2 miles from the closest mailbox, and threw cherry bombs at the moose and caribou to get them out of the driveway so she could take all of us kids and put us in the car and drive into town. Now, you've met my mother. My mother is very elegant and beautiful, and she doesn't at all look like that person. But that's who my mom was. My mother knew there was a way, and she was a pioneer in her place. And she followed my dad all over the world and did things that I couldn't even begin to imagine. So I think about passing on to my grandchildren that story of pioneer spirit. And really, you can see that, can't you, through the 3 generations all the way down. This is why, Connie, when you sing the song, "These Are the Women I Came From," this is why this song touches me so deeply. Who do you come from? Who are the women and the men that you come from? And what did they put in your heart that allows you to live a certain way today? And how important is it to be able to share that with children? So when we think about who we will be as the ancestors, I invite you to think short and long. In the long picture, we all have ancestors who are faceless. That 400 years that we're talking about. We all have ancestors whose faces we don't know, whose lives we don't know about, but from them comes our legacy. From them comes medical advancement and agricultural advancement and industrial advancement. And from them also comes some of the great plagues of our society right now, racism being one of them. Those are the unseen faces that we will become. And then I want you to think in the short term. I want you to think about the short period of your parents and your grandparents, and if you knew them, your great-grandparents, 3 generations back. And I want to inspire you to take the time to really think about this and really write down what they taught you. What do you carry as the person that you are? What is in your character that you want to pass on to someone? To Sadie, to generations of children like Sadie, to the 400 years of people who will somehow be related to you. What do you want them to know? I want you to write that down too. There are some really important things for us to do to be good ancestors. One is to move from predicting the future to imagining the future. It's one thing to predict, oh, global warming. What's going to happen in the future? Climate change, global warming. Great. What does that really mean? You see, it's very easy to talk about a prediction. It has no emotional signature. We can even say to ourselves, yeah, that might happen or it might not. Maybe some great new science will come up. Maybe these innovative new kids will create a way around that. True. But when we imagine into a world affected by climate change, we begin to make different choices. We begin to think much more carefully about what we're doing because we're imagining what our children might face. It's important for us to consider that, to actually look at the world that we have right now, which is extremely polarized, and to imagine what will happen if we do nothing about it. If we make no effort, what will the world look like for our children? Another way to use our imagination, which in my mind is one of the greatest blessings that we are given, one of the greatest blessings of being human, is to imagine that every change we make in our own behavior adjusts the future. That everything that we do right now allows us to imagine a better future for those that come after us. Every time we have a conversation with someone, every time we take the uncomfortable step to be imperfect in learning how, every time we challenge ourselves to do things in a way that is in love, that brings hope and gratitude forward. Every time we do that, we can imagine that the world is a little bit better for those that are coming after us, for those who will stand on our shoulders, for those who will call us ancestor. It's an important thing. It's an important thing for us to engage with young people, to engage with them and ask them how they're doing, to ask them what they think about the world, what we as adults can do to make their world better, to ask them and to listen, and then to change our behavior accordingly. Because they have something to tell us that we don't know yet. They came in with wisdom that we haven't even imagined. And just to be heard by someone older than you, I think that's one of the things I remember the most about both of my grandmothers, is that they asked me, how are you? What's it like being your age? Instead of telling me that they could just remember what it was like to be my age. They actually asked me and were curious about how the world was different. So how do we talk to our young people? even the itty bitty ones, and listen, give them a place to share what is important to them. So we can imagine a world where what is important to them comes to be. The last thing I want to leave you with in terms of thinking about your legacy is something I said earlier on. Your legacy needs to be something more than a bench with your name on it. It needs to be something more than if I just received this beautiful gift as a porcelain dish that my grandma said, here, I want you to have this. It was important in my family. You can have it. If I didn't know the story of it, if I didn't understand what it's teaching me, I wouldn't be sharing it with you this morning. I might not even still have it. It would probably be packed away in a box somewhere where I wasn't really looking at it or learning from it or thinking of it. But every time I see it, it inspires me. It inspires me to be brave in the parts of life that are fragile. It inspires me to gift that bravery, to take a risk. It inspires me in ways that are without words. To gift someone with something means nothing. To gift someone with the story of your life means everything. Our wisdom can be attached to something so simple or so precious, or it can just be shared when we share the stories of our lives, how we've gotten where we've gotten. And if you are one of those people who's behind this screen thinking to yourself, oh, I don't have anyone to share that with, there are children. There are so many children. 1 in 5 children in the world is struggling with poverty right now. There are children across the planet. Most of you know I stay in contact with a young man I've adopted in Africa. He's 23 years old. I've adopted him here. He calls me mom. I call him son. His father died in a war. His mother is in another country, that same war-torn country. And if he were to go back, he would be killed. And so he lives in a refugee camp. And we talk almost daily online. Almost daily. And you know, yeah, there are things that we do to help him, but the most important thing we do is remind him every day that he's loved and encourage him and share our stories and hear his. So there are children hungry for your attention, hungry for the wisdom that you have, hungry for a sense that they belong. And you can change the future that way. So I hope that what you gain from today is a passion to be that ancestor. A passion to be that ancestor who changes 400 years of the future because you can imagine it differently and you're willing to live that way. Connie?
If this is my last song, if this is my final day, if tomorrow I'll be gone, what do I want to say? If this is my last song, if it's my time to go, when my body's moved on, what will I have to show? Oh, no, not fortune or fame. They scatter to the wind. The things that make a name just don't matter in the end. But is the world a little more peaceful? Oceans and sky a little more blue? Is humankind a little bit wiser about the good that we can do? Does the sun shine a little bit brighter where before there was only rain? If so, then I'm glad I came. If these are my last words for all of the earth to hear, if all that I have ever been is about to disappear, if these are my last words, there's nothing that I need to say. I have only tried to serve. It's never been about talking anyway. So much hurt there is to heal. It's hard to understand. All I can hope to fear is that I am doing what I can. Is the world a little more peaceful? Oceans and sky a little more blue? Is humankind a little bit wiser about the good that we can do? Does the sun shine a little bit brighter where before there was only rain? If so, then I'm glad I came. Have I given hope to the hopeless? Has a hungry soul been fed? Has a child stood a little bit taller 'cause of something that I said? Have I left a little kindness? Have I eased a little pain? If so, then I'm glad I came. For that, I'm so glad I came. If this is my last song, what do I leave behind? What do I pass on if I am out of time?
Thank you, Connie. It's an important question, isn't it? Most of us get to know when that last moment comes. So what are we leaving? You have a choice, friends, to leave this time together today without much more thought. You have a choice to either take this with you and take it into your heart and make it part of your life, or to say, nice Sunday. Think I'll go get breakfast now, and not think much more about it at all. I hope that your choice is to be passionate about becoming the ancestor that you know that you had, that you wish that you had, that you can be proud of. And to think of yourself beyond the generations that will remember you by face and name. To think into those generations that come after you become simply a nameless, faceless ancestor. Will you have left something valuable? Because if we're not thinking that way, we are not honoring the ancestors who came before us. If we're not thinking that way, there isn't hope for a future. The hope for the future lives in our hearts, and we are the ones responsible for bringing it into life and for passing it on to our children, to our children's children, to our neighbors' children, to the children who we aunt and uncle and love and adopt wherever they are. And if you really can't think of a way to connect with children around you, let me know. I have some ways. There are good organizations you can volunteer for. There are good ways you can be in service. There are ways for you to take your wisdom out into the world and make a difference. I'm so grateful for all of you because I know what kind of ancestors you are. I know the heart of this community is so strong and so committed. And I'm just so grateful to spend this time with you. We have a few things I want to remind you of. One is that this is the last week to sign up for the book study. So if you haven't done that, watch for all the information in the e-blast or call Chris at the office, 719-471-4556. There are different times during the week and different days during the week, and you can find a time. We'll be doing a chapter a week as a book study. If you are, for one reason or another, not able to participate, or that's not what you want to do, you don't want to do the book study group, I'm going to put up a Facebook group. Everyone who signs up will receive an invitation, and the invitation will go out in the e-blast as well, so that you can still be part of the ongoing conversation. So I'll give you a link for that. The book is called The Gift, 12 Lessons to Save Your Life. It's by Edith Eger. It's amazing. It's really quite an amazing book. So order yourself a copy. If there's any reason that you are unable to do that, please reach out to me. We'll make sure you get a copy so that you can participate. Seems to me like there was one other thing I was going to tell you about today. Thanksgiving. We're still collecting for Thanksgiving gift cards for Westside Cares. Oh, I know what it is. Next week. So next week, High Plains Church Unitarian Universalist will be joining our service. And this is part of a community get-together. We want to, we being Julia and I, Reverend Julia is their minister. And for those who might not know, High Plains Church shares our building. So we are wanting to make sure that we stay connected to them as well as to each other. So over the holiday season, we've come up with a couple ways to do that. And one of those ways is that we're going to be having them as guests in our service next week, and we will be guests in their service on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So we'll be joining each other. So they will be joining us at 10:30. We will be celebrating our ancestors. And this is the Sunday that I want you to bring with you a picture of who you're celebrating, because you will have a chance. We'll be taking the whole community into small groups, and each of you will have a chance to share about your ancestor with each other, so that you will not only get to honor and talk about your ancestor, but you'll also have an opportunity to meet other people from our community and theirs. So please bring one ancestor. I know you have a bunch. Susan Quilish, this is going to be the biggest challenge of your life. Bring one ancestor and a short story about them. And so that, because each of you will have, it'll be small groups, you'll each have about 2 minutes to 3 minutes to do this sharing. And then we're going to do a blessing and a meditation together. And we're also going to be doing a community blessing, calling the strength of the ancestors and the strength of community as we go forward into election week, which will be the week following that. And all of us need to be balanced and centered during that week. So we're going to do a little blessing that's oriented toward the election. And let me just be clear that it's not our job as a sacred community, as beloved community. It is not my job as the minister or the job of this community to in any way direct you towards who you vote for. In fact, that's clearly not our job. This is a cross-cultural blessing that we can all keep our act together, keep our feet on the ground and our hearts open, and move through this time in a blessed and holy way. So it's going to be an important time. I hope that you will be a guest. I hope that you will make other people feel like guests and welcome them in. I hope you'll join us. And I can't think of anything else we've got going on. Bring a picture, come and join us. Let's pray our way out. Take a nice deep breath in and release. In this holy and sacred moment, we're grateful. Grateful for every heart gathered here. Grateful for the oneness of this community. We're grateful for what that really means, to open our hearts to one another, to experience this life together, to support each other, hold hope for one another, to send healing to one another, to know that no matter where we are or what we're doing, we're never alone. That this community has no boundaries, no limits. That we reach out heart to heart, mind to mind, over and across distance. We're grateful for the connection. Grateful for how we're growing together. Grateful for our vision of the future, for our imagination, which tells us it can be so much better even than it is now. We're grateful. And with gratitude for each other, we close this sacred and safe time together with these words. Amen. Amen. And so it is.
As always, I invite you to connect with anyone who comes to your mind. And it seems to me we can do that across our ancestors as well, and perhaps even into our future. Isn't that a fun experience to use our blessed imaginations to be able to do that? But if anyone who is living in this real time comes to your mind, drop them a note or give them a call or an email and connect. And for now, I invite you to put your screen on gallery mode if it isn't there already, so we can all sing together our closing song.